My name is Elizabeth Fyack, and I will be reporting on Asperger's syndrome. According to the DSM-4, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, Asperger's syndrome is characterized by severe and sustained impairment in social interaction and the development of restricted, repetitive patterns of behavior, interests, and activities. Asperger's syndrome is within the autism spectrum of disorders and is considered to be one of the most mild forms. What differentiates Asperger's syndrome from other types of autism is the lack of significant delays in language, cognitive development, age-appropriate self-help skills, curiosity about the environment, and most adaptive behaviors. According to autismspeaks.org, those who have Asperger's syndrome typically have average or above average intelligence and an early acuity with language and singular passions. They may have the inability to interact with peers, a lack of desire to interact with peers, lack of appreciation of social cues, and socially and emotionally inappropriate behaviors. Their narrow interest is manifested in the exclusion of other activities, repetitive adherence, and knowledge that is more rote than meaningful. Social language problems often include the misinterpretation of literal or implied meanings. Physically, those with Asperger's syndrome have a limited use of gestures, clumsy body language, limited facial expressions, inappropriate expressions, a peculiar or stiff gaze, and/or motor clumsiness documented by poor performance on neurodevelopmental examinations. Overall, those with Asperger's syndrome tend to be physically and socially awkward despite having advanced cognitive abilities. Although information on the prevalence of Asperger's syndrome is limited, it appears to be more common in males. According to autismspeaks.org, 1 in 150 children are diagnosed with some form of autism, Asperger's syndrome included. autismspeaks.org reports that siblings of those diagnosed with Asperger's have a higher chance of being diagnosed themselves. A diagnosis is made after a doctor screens the child for autism spectrum disorders using the DSM-4 as a guide. Typically, the primary care doctor refers the child to a psychologist or other specialist in the field to make an official diagnosis. Currently, there is no cure for Asperger's syndrome. However, early intervention has proven to be an effective treatment. The cause for autism spectrum disorders, Asperger's syndrome included, is unknown at this time. However, extensive research is being done to determine the cause. According to the DSM-4, Asperger's syndrome is sometimes observed in association with general medical conditions. Various non-specific neurological symptoms or signs may be noted. Motor milestones may be delayed, and motor clumsiness is often observed. Asperger's syndrome can take a large toll on families. Many parents report feeling as if their child is trapped within their own world, unable to be reached. It is imperative that parents be proactive and positive toward helping their child as early as possible. Higher treatment success rates are paired with early intervention. In a letter posted on autismspeaks.org from the In Their Own Words section, in which those affected by autism share stories of triumphs and struggles, a mother with a child who has Asperger's syndrome wrote about her daughter in a social situation. The mother has 2 girls, Darby, who is typically developing, and Kendall, who has Asperger's syndrome. As the 3 finished a picnic one day, the mother encouraged her daughters to play with some children nearby. Darby, the typically developing child, jumped right into the action, while Kendall found comfort examining tree bark. Taking a break from play, Darby asked her mother sadly, "When did Kendall go into Kendallland, and when is she going to come back?" Her mother replied that she did not know when she went to her own world or when she would be back, but reminded her that they were all working very hard to make it happen. Darby replied, "I know that if we all work together, we can bring her home. I just know it." There are numerous resources and services available that families should take advantage of. From RareDiseases.org, the home site of the National Organization of Rare Diseases, a search of Asperger's syndrome will bring up symptoms and a large list of internet resources. One resource I found to be very useful for families is autismspeaks.org. This site has the most up-to-date research on causes and treatments, along with discussion boards and support groups. Autism-Society.org has an excellent resources page with links to find local resources, support groups, and conferences. Overall, Asperger's syndrome is becoming more and more prevalent in our lives. We are fortunate that there is much research being conducted so that we may learn how to best treat this syndrome. There are many resources and support systems available for those affected by Asperger's syndrome, and I strongly urge you to look further into this syndrome as it will become more frequent in our daily lives.